Hi, everybody, and welcome to Faith in an Ever Changing World Encouragement and Hope. I'm Janet Harley, your host, and I am excited to have with me today Kimber Hanchey Ogden and her son, Seth Hanchey. Thank you both for joining me this morning.
Thank you,
And
Miss
wow,
Janet.
do we have a powerful story for you this morning. So please stay with us. I do want to introduce briefly Senior Pastor Kimber. She is a motivational speaker and author as well. And Seth is a traumatic brain injury warrior and advocate, Special Olympian gold medalist in powerlifting, and a social media influencer. Thank you both for joining me. And right after our brief introduction, we'll hear more from Pastor Kimber and Seth. Stay with us. And welcome back. Thank you. All right, Pastor Kim and Seth. In this season, what has God given you to do, and how is faith helping you do it?
Well, through all of this circumstance, and Seth's story in itself is such a miracle, but I
Absolutely.
can kind of give a little background of what it meant to me, and which is the reason we wrote the book, Push Through It. It is our story, Push Through It.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
the reason I wrote that book and the reason I started a brain injury foundation 11 and a half years ago, Seth was ran over. Full-time youth pastor, triathlete. He was in college to be a nurse, had his life planned out, and he was ran over by an 81-year-old woman in a van. She
Mm.
did not brake till she hit him. And I went to such a dark place. When you're in ministry, you're the one that's always walking in and you're the one speaking life over someone or giving them
Yeah.
the scriptures. And ironically, Seth had preached the night before that the purpose and destiny of God, that nothing the enemy does can take that, because he was a prolific speaker, very gifted. And then he
Mm.
gets ran over. And of all things, his speech is taken, Miss Janet.
Wow.
Speech. So
Mm.
the amazing thing is you can get stuck at such a dark place because, God did not say that we would not go through storms, but he
Right.
said that he would be with us
Trials and tribulations. Hmm.
in the storm, and that nothing that happens to us, that it would prosper. But that didn't say that there would be nothing that happened to us. And in the theology part of that, I was just under this false assumption that I thought, well, if you do all the right things, nothing bad ever happened. And I mean, who would have expected something so unimaginable and
Yeah.
awful to happen to someone doing all the right things? And it was where God stepped in the darkest place of my life. And in that very, very dark place, I found myself, Miss Janet, being very angry. I
Yeah.
was angry at the woman and their family who'd never reached out to check on Seth or us. And our lives
Mm.
were turned upside down. And he was my baby. He's the third of the homeschoolers. Everybody flew the nest and they were doing great. And he was the last and he was doing great. And I was like, okay, Mama, now it's time for you to get your own life.
Yeah.
And God had other plans. I say often, he was such a great speaker and he was an amazing encourager even then. But God took something that was so horrible and so awful, and he brought the most incredibly beautiful story out of something that standing at the beginning of this, all I could say was why?
Yeah.
Why God? And I got stuck there, Miss Janet, because I was so angry at everything, the situation, at God, if you're so great, in
Mm.
how did you let this happen? And so I struggled with my faith. And
Mm.
when you're a minister and you admit that you were struggling with your faith,
Yeah.
it was the hardest thing to do, to get up and admit I struggled. And it wasn't for just a moment. It wasn't for 24 hours or a
Mm.
week or a month. It was for a couple years, and I was in the darkest place and would still go to church, encourage people, speak life and hope over them, pray with them, believe for them genuinely. But in the back of my mind, I really questioned God, and I was stuck at that question mark. And I say it this way: if you get there and you get stuck at the why, God, why did this happen? And you get bitter, you lose the life's breath and the purpose that is inside of you. Because the subtitle of the book is How to Find Purpose in Your Pain. And that's really what happens. I believe your greatest purpose, your greatest reason of why happens in the graveyard of what you lost. Whether that's a loved one to COVID, or a loved one to cancer, or a divorce, a relationship, your job, your mind, your health. There's so many things that people experience that are great, great, deep losses. For Seth, it was his speech. And if you're a speaker and you lose your speech, with Seth, he knows what he wants to say, but he can't execute it. So it's like being stuck in a glass box. But I say his life has preached healing and hope and grace to more people without the words than he would have ever reached with all of his prolific vocabulary and speaking, that he had. But I got out of that dark situation, Miss Janet, by giving what I needed. And that was, I just got up and said, okay, I needed hope. Starting a brain injury foundation. I didn't need a medical diagnosis. I had a whole list of those and the prognosis and what he'll never do. I needed to find a way to move past the why. And the way I did that was I started giving what I needed. And Seth still does that. And he actually became the inspiration, the motivational speaker with actions and not words, because he would have a horrible day and it never stopped him from going up to someone and giving them a hug or saying, pray for you. How are you? And I watched as I would be angry. And when he wanted to meet the lady that hit him, I really bucked and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I just couldn't. And it took a process for me to forgive her. And I remember falling on my knees and I just said, God, I'm tired. I'm tired of being angry at you. I'm tired of being angry at her. Please help me forgive. And at that moment, God flooded me with such grace. And I heard the words, Miss Janet, that Christ himself spoke, because I felt such shame and guilt as a minister, struggling with my faith and being angry at God. And at that moment, it was like this washing over me of such grace and sweet mercy. And it was like God spoke to me and said, daughter, listen. And I heard the words of Jesus Christ on the cross, where he said, God, where are you? Where are you? Why did you leave me? Why is this awful thing happening when you called me to do something great and I've done nothing wrong? He was sinless, spotless. And so it's not punishment. God spoke those words to me. It's not punishment. It's preparation for purpose and promotion. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you were talking a minute ago about when Seth went to visit the lady who had hit him. And I actually, let's see if I can pull up, if we can get this video, this very powerful video, very short video of when Seth visited with this woman and forgave her.
And it was 5.5 years later, Miss Janet.
Wow.
5.5 years later, and we still had not heard from them. So the chapter in that book called God Help Me Forgive was written the morning of that meeting because God woke me up. I wrote the chapter and I was weeping because it was ministering healing to me. And when God said, I want you to reach out to her and let her know that she's been forgiven and give her peace. And little did I know, I just reached out on Facebook. I didn't have their information. They got right back with us and said, we'd love for Seth to come pray for mom, because that's what I asked them. And I watched my son minister healing over this woman who had basically taken his life, Miss Janet,
Yeah.
and destroyed his dreams. That's what the mama in me always.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm watching him as we walk in. I've always thought, okay, justice will be served. And I wanted her to experience what it was like to be back in diapers, to lose independence, to
Yes.
not have the full capacity to get your thoughts out. Miss Janet, how terrible and how poetic she was in the latter stages of Alzheimer's.
Oh my.
We walk in and she is in a diaper. She is in a recliner because she could not get up by herself, same as Seth. Seth was paralyzed on the right side, and he had came home in a wheelchair and diapers when he came home
Yeah.
5 months after being in the hospital. And I'm looking, and many years earlier, 5 years earlier, I would have went, ha ha, justice is served,
Yeah.
I didn't. Because of what I experienced, I wept, and I just wept with compassion for this woman and for her older son and daughter-in-law, who were now the caregivers, which I related to as well. And it wasn't that aha, it was like, I feel so sad for her.
Yeah.
But Seth prayed for her, and you're going to see that. And we let her know that the worst thing that happened to us became the most beautiful thing that happened for us, because now he is inspiring so many people and preaching without words to so many people the gospel of grace and forgiveness and hope. And God used that moment for her, because 2 weeks later she passed away.
Oh.
Knew she was forgiven and found peace.
Knowing.
Yes,
All right. Let's see if I can get it to show for us.
okay.
God, awesome. God, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Amen.
Oh, we.
Those
How
words,
powerful is that?
those words at the end, Miss Janet, he showed me as we crossed back over the bridges that he was ran over on. And he said that God had given him those words, and it was love, hope, peace, grace, and forgiveness.
Yes.
And so that's why those words are at the end of that.
Oh,
Yeah.
how wonderful. How wonderful. Seth, was that difficult for you to forgive this woman?
No,
No.
on God. So,
That's right. All God. I tell you, God can certainly give us strength to do things we would not ever think we might be able to do. So even in forgiving someone. Thank you both. Let me get some information on the screen here for your book, and also, yes, push through it. The Seth Hanchey Story and How to Find Purpose in Your Pain. It is on Amazon and Kindle, available in Kindle as well. It's also iBooks and available on Instagram Sparks and Barnes and Noble. So please get this book. It will certainly help you, and I know that everyone has been blessed by this story. Seth and Kimber, thank you so much for joining me, and we'd love to have you back at a later time and see what's going on. But thank you all, and thank you all for watching. Thanks again. Have faith and look up, friends, where our help comes from. Bye. God bless.